Hey, welcome back for another lesson. Let's go ahead and review our intervals. We have learned an interval of a second, and those are two sounds right next to each other. We have also learned the interval of a third, and a fourth, and we have also introduced a fifth. Go ahead and close your eyes. I'm going to play an interval on the piano. Let's see if we can identify which interval I'm playing with your eyes closed. Go ahead and close your eyes. What interval is this one? You can go ahead and open your eyes and you will see that it is a third. Go ahead and close your eyes again. Here's another interval. You can open your eyes, and this you will see is the interval of a fifth. Close your eyes. Let's do another one. Go ahead and open your eyes, and you can see that I'm playing an interval of a second. And let's do one more. Go ahead and close your eyes. Open your eyes, and you'll see that I'm playing the interval of a third. Let's go ahead and review the names of the sounds on the piano going up in thirds. So I'll do a few and then I'll have you do some. I'm gonna start here on C and go up in thirds. So this is C, E, G, B, D, F, A, C. You go ahead and take a moment on your piano, start low on your piano and go up in thirds, naming the sounds as you go. Let's also name the sounds going down in thirds. So I'm gonna start up here on my piano. This is a high G. So here's G, E, C, A, F, D, B, G. Why don't you take a few moments on your piano, start high on your piano and go down in thirds, naming the sounds as you go. In our last lesson, we talked about an 11-lined staff. So since the beginning, we have learned how the piano is made up of all of these sounds, and all of these sounds have names, and you have learned those names. And now we're learning how to write those sounds on the staff. The first ones that we talked about at the last lesson were middle C, and this one is on the very middle line of our 11-lined staff. And we make that line a little bit shorter because if we have all these lines in a row, sometimes it's hard to see which one is the middle. But by making it a little bit smaller, we know that that middle line is middle C. We also learned the very top line of the staff. We learned that there are 5 lines that go up, so we counted up 5 times in thirds, and we found that the top line of the staff is high F. Then we also figured out what the bottom line of the staff was. So if we go back to middle C, we know that there's 5 lines down from middle C as well. So we counted down by thirds 5 times, and we land down here on low G. So in our last lesson, we learned how to write middle C, we learned how to write high F, and we learned how to write low G. We've talked a lot about these lines on our staff, and that as long as we know one line, we can figure out the rest of the lines on our staff. So we've talked today that as long as we know our little middle C line, we can figure out the rest of the lines on our staff. A long time ago, people used to put a little C right next to that middle C line. And that was their indication as to what that line represented, and then musicians could discover what the rest of the lines were because that little C was next to that line. Now that little C eventually changed into what we call a C clef. And this is a picture of a C clef. So clef is the French word for key. So a key is something that indicates something else to us. So have you ever, or if you've ever seen a map with a key in the corner and it has different drawings or colors to represent something to see on the map? So this is a key for our music. It's a key because it tells us the middle C line is C. But because we use the word key for other things in piano, like these are our keys, musicians have agreed to use the French word clef to identify what a line is in our staff. So this C clef, this picture, was what musicians originally used to represent the middle line on the staff. Now one would think that one clef, our C clef, would be enough. But in the coming lessons, we're going to discover why we're going to use two more clefs than just the C clef to learn to read music. We were just talking about clefs, and we're going to learn how to draw two of the clefs today. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to draw my 11-lined staff. 5 lines plus our middle C line. Okay, so we have 11 lines. And the first clef we're going to draw up here on these 5 lines. The first thing I'm going to do is to make a line from a little bit above the staff to the bottom line of this set of 5 lines. So I have a straight line. I'm going to make a curved line right here. I'm going to make a much wider curved line right here. And then the most important part of this staff is we're going to make another curved line that circles this second line right here. Okay? And to finish this staff, I'm going to draw a letter J with a dot. So here's one clef. This we are calling our G clef, and we'll explain why in a moment. So before doing the next clef, let's go ahead and draw this G clef again. So let's go to a clean sheet of paper, and I'm going to draw my 11 lined staff again. There's my 11 lined staff. I'm going to start with one long line, starts a little bit above the staff and comes down to the bottom of these first 5 lines. So we have one line. Then I'm going to draw one curved line like this, and then a thicker or fatter curved line over on this side. And then the most important part is this curly cue that must curl right over this line, okay? And then to finish this clef, I'm going to draw a J with a dot. Now let's talk a little bit about these clefs that I just drew. And I told you that the most important part of this clef is this part right here that goes right around this line. And the reason that's the most important part is because this clef is called a G clef. It is called a G clef because it circles, if we can continue finishing this, which we're not gonna draw this circle, but if we finish that curlicue, it circles this line, and this line is G. We know it's G, first of all, because this is called a G clef and it circles that line, but we also know that this is middle C, right? And if we go up a third from middle C, we find E here, which we'll learn in a little while, but if we go up another third from E, we find that this line is G. So we can use middle C as a reference, but now we also have our G clef to always remind us where the G line is. So we've just learned our G clef and why it's called a G clef. We're going to learn a second clef that helps us remember the bottom 5 lines. And this clef, the first thing we're going to do is draw a dot on this line. So if we look at these 5 lines as a set, it's not the top one, but it's this one. And then we make what appears to be a half of a heart that goes all the way up to this top line and all the way down to the bottom line. And then we add a dot here and a dot here. Okay, let me do that one more time. Let's draw our 11 lined staff. Here's our middle C. To draw our F clef, which is what this is called, or the clef for these bottom 5 lines, we draw a dot on this line, a half of a heart, and then 2 more dots. And maybe you can guess why, but the reason this is called an F clef is because this dot right here is on an F line. If we go back and we know that this is middle C, and we go down a third from middle C to this line, we know that this line will be A. If we go down another third, we find out that this line is F. When we assign homework this week, I will tell you to draw an 11-lined staff. I'll have you draw a G clef and an F clef, and I will have you label high F, G, middle C, F, and low G. So when I ask you to do that, this is what I'm asking you to do. Start with an 11-line staff. Okay, we have 11 lines. We're going to draw our treble clef, going to draw our F clef. We will draw middle C and label that. We will draw high F and label that. We will draw G, which we know is G now because our G clef always circles the G line. We can draw F because we know our F clef dot is always on the F line. And we can draw low G down here because we know low G is the bottom of the line, bottom of the staff, I'm sorry. We should go back and label those as well. So this week when I ask you to draw an 11-lined staff, and to label what you know, this is what we have learned so far. We've been working on the farmhouse song and we are just about finished. We are going to use today's lesson to review everything that we have learned so far. So with our right hand, everything we're doing is in the interval of a third. So for our first couple measures, we learned to be rocking back and forth. And we repeat that. And then with our left hand, we're down here with our pinky on low G. And we go back and forth from the C to the D. And then we put our hands together. And then the last lesson, we learned the next two measures, which are like this with our right hand. And then with our left hand, we simply add a C. And that's where we stopped. Go ahead and I'll play the, go ahead and watch and I'll play the whole song one more time to where we stopped. And if you're enjoying this song, go ahead and keep working on that this lesson, and we will hopefully finish this song at our next lesson. We have started doing time dictations in most of our lessons, and we're going to do another one today. So this is where I'm going to play you a melody of notes, and you listen for the rhythm. So I'm going to play a combination of 1 pulse, 2 pulse, and 3 pulse sounds, and you listen for that rhythm and write it down. So with this particular time dictation, I'm going to play 4 measures, and each of those 4 measures is going to have 3 pulses in each of the measures. So as I get my paper or whiteboard ready to write out this dictation, this is what mine would look like. There are 4 measures that are ready to be filled in with 3 pulses in each measure. Here is the full dictation, and then we'll go back and work through it measure by measure. So here are all 4 measures. I'm going to play a metronome as we go so that you can hear the steady pulse. Here we go. I'm going to play the entire 4 measures again, and then we'll work through it measure by measure. So here's all 4 measures. Go ahead and write down anything that you're able to. You can replay it in your head a couple times and write down what you can, and then we'll go back. So here's just the first measure of our time dictation. And here's the first measure again. So do you hear 1 pulse notes, 2 pulse notes, or 3 pulse notes? write down what you hear. And let's go on to the second measure. So here's the second measure. Here's the second measure again. Okay, now I'm going to play the first measure and the second measure. And here comes the third measure. Listen for 1 pulse, 2 pulse, or 3 pulse notes. Here's the third measure. Okay, I'm gonna play the first 3 measures. So here's measure 1, 2, and 3. And here's the final 4th measure. So listen again for a 1 pulse, a 2 pulse, or a 3 pulse sound. Here's the third measure when I play. And here are all 4 measures. And feel free to go back and listen to that as many times as you need to listen to it until you feel like you have been able to hear. If you're writing down 1 pulse, 2 pulse, or 3 pulse notes, there's nothing wrong with going back and listening multiple times. Let's go ahead and take a look at what that time dictation looks like. So here are the notes that you are hearing me playing. So let's go ahead, I'll play it all again so you can listen to me play it while you watch the notes. So here's all 4 measures being played. So we had 3 1 pulse notes in the first measure. Our second measure had a 2 pulse note followed by a 1 pulse note. And then our third measure had 3 1 pulse notes again. And then a final 3 pulse note in our last measure. I'll play that one more time without the metronome. So here's all 4 measures.
For your homework this week, practice drawing the G Clef and the F Clef, and continue doing it until you can draw it really neat and fluently. And then go ahead and draw an 11-lined staff like I did. And then once you've drawn the 11 lines, draw the G Clef and the F Clef on the staff, label the high F, label the G on the G Clef line, label middle C, label the F on the F Clef line, and label low G. And then once you've drawn them on the staff, why don't you go ahead and see if you can find those sounds on the piano as well. Continue practice drawing 1, 2, and 3 pulse notes, then draw some bar lines, and fill in as many combinations as you can to create 4 pulse measures. And once you've created those measures, go ahead and try playing them on the piano, and maybe you could even use a metronome as you play them. And if you're enjoying it, go ahead and continue practicing the farmhouse.